Super excited to be here. It's always an honor to be asked one time, and I think Brian, John, I think this is like my fifth time. So I mean, that's that's awesome. So it's either the good snacks or I don't know. You guys keep having me back, so I love it. Thank you. Very excited. We're going to hit a little bit different topic than what we've done in the past. We want to actually look at a Bible passage, and I'm going to talk through it a little bit and kind of incorporate a little bit more talk about faith and Jesus than we have in the other sessions that I've been here. So just to kind of get our minds going, throw this question out to you. Tell me something that you've lost before. Have you ever lost anything?
Wallet, phone.
Lost your wallet, phone? Did you ever, did you find it, or have you ever lost it where you weren't able to find it? No.
That toy.
What else?
My child.
Tell us.
Went to Mall of America. All of a sudden he was gone.
Wow. How old?
Probably 5.
How long were you separated?
About 3 minutes before a security guy came up and said, "Man, is there something wrong?" And he's like, "Can't even talk." He's like, and he has on his thing, he says, "They found the boy, he's down at the,
I was,
down in the play area."
yeah.
But it wasn't 3 days, right?
Yeah, exactly. It was not 3 days, but it probably felt like 3 days. Yeah, I can't imagine. Yeah. Someone else, what's something you've lost? We got wallets, phones, child.
Baseball glove.
A baseball glove. You found it?
Yeah, I did find it.
It's a big deal.
It was pretty small, so I was in trouble until I found the glove.
It's easy to walk away from a game and leave that glove behind, no doubt. Anyone else think of something you've lost? Dog. Did you find him or her?
Yes.
Good. How long were they gone?
Good 2 hours. We lived off of University, kind of by Fargo South, and he went all the way to past Clear Garden, almost to Maine.
Yeah.
We'd catch him and he would look at us and then go.
Off he went.
It was a game.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure we can all relate to losing something. Luke chapter 15 is what we're going to look at today. And Jesus actually tells 3 stories of things that were lost. I first want to kind of bring up the point that Jesus didn't just tell these stories because he had an agenda or because this was his goal was to tell these stories. He actually told them in response to some criticism he received. And I think one of the fascinating things about Jesus is he never taught life or spiritual lessons based on his needs or his agenda. And let's be honest, so often in the church, in our society, we see that the church or Christians have an agenda. That we come into a meeting where I need to tell you guys something. So I just want to let you know, other than the topic that was thrown out, I do not have an agenda with us today. I'm not Jesus for sure, but I do love how he always responded to questions. He saw conflict and then he would speak up. He would see something and he would leverage that as a teachable moment. And I guess my parenting tip for all of us that are parents or grandparents, I think the best way to teach our children is through teachable moments, not through sitting them down and giving them a speech. I think the best way that we can teach people is to leverage opportunities when you see something or a topic comes up and you seize that moment to have that conversation. So Luke chapter 15, just to read the first 2 verses, just to get our minds going on what Jesus did. Now the tax collectors and sinners, I always love that. I mean, there are tax collectors and sinners. I mean, so tax collectors, they're like in their own category of sinners. I find that fascinating. Now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus. But the religious people, the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, they muttered. So they didn't outwardly speak, but they muttered under their breath, "This man welcomes sinners and he eats with them." And so they were ticked off because Jesus was spending time with tax collectors and sinners. And so what does Jesus do? Does he give them a speech? Nope. He tells them 3 stories. And I love the progression of the stories. The first story he tells is about a sheep that is lost. He talks about a shepherd. The shepherd comes in at the end of the day and he starts counting. He has 100 sheep in his, I don't know, what are a group of sheep? I don't even know. A flock, I guess? Would that be the word? So a flock. He counts them, 1, 2, 3, 97, 98, 99. Like, no, I have 100. A shepherd wasn't the owner of the sheep. He was guarding the sheep for the owner. And he's like, holy cow, I just lost. One of the sheep must be missing. So he counts them again, and I've only got 99. And Jesus said, what shepherd wouldn't leave the 99 and go after and find the one that is lost? Now, I think sheep kind of get a bad name. Often when we think of sheep, we think of not the smartest of animals. You've probably, if you haven't seen the video, it's out there where like sheep come running up to a cliff and they jump over, and what does the next sheep do? Jumps over as well. And we're like, what are you doing? Like I can just think the sheep's looking down like, whoo, man, that didn't look like it turned out too well, but I don't know, I'm part of this flock, so off I go. Same thing happens, you know. I think sheep are committed to community. And they are high trusting animals. Unfortunately, in our society, we have a lack of trust. And so we look at sheep and say they're kind of stupid. And yeah, we shouldn't have, quote, blind trust. I get that. But I kind of admire sheep because they're committed to relationship. And I think that was one reason why Jesus used sheep as an example a lot, is that this sheep that had wandered, the last thing a sheep wants to do is wander from the other 99, right? I mean, sheep, they are committed to stick. I mean, do you ever just see sheep like running every direction? They don't. They don't. They stick together. They are family. They're a flock. They're committed to each other. And so when this shepherd realizes that one of these sheep is missing, I think it's like, wow, can you imagine? Poor little guy or gal, probably like your dog made it into a game, but this sheep was probably shaking, cold, scared. It was the end of the day. And so Jesus said, what good shepherd? I mean, I don't know how valuable sheep are. I had a friend in the cities that she raised sheep and she had names for them. And I don't know, I thought it was kind of weird. I'm not a big animal person, but those were her pets. Those were her babies. And she had them for many years. I don't know. Sheep are not a big thing to me. But a shepherd, his job is to protect and to care for those sheep. And for one of them to be off on its own was an incredibly terrifying experience for that sheep. And so Jesus said, what good shepherd wouldn't leave those 99 and go out and search for that one that is lost? And what shepherd wouldn't scoop that sheep up, comfort him or her, put him on his shoulder, and walk back and bring him back into community and connection with the rest of that flock? So remember, he told that story in response to criticism about what? Hanging out with sinners and tax collectors. And he told the story about the one sheep that's lost, the one sheep that got separated. And then he talks about a woman, probably a widow, who had 10 coins, and one of them got lost. Now, a drachma, scholars would say that was probably in that society, that was a day's worth of wage. So I don't know, if you make, if you make 20 bucks an hour, work an 8-hour day, that'd be like $150. I mean, that's quite a bit. Have any of you ever lost, we probably all have lost a 5 or a 10. Have any of you lost more than, I'm not talking like a gambling bet for the Cubs or something. I'm talking like, have you ever lost more than $150? Anyone? You have. Mike. Ooh, how much you lose? 1,000. Ooh. So, hold that thought. That's like a lot of money. How'd you do it?
I was doing my wife's engagement ring, and I had the cash with me.
Oh.
And somebody broke in my car, and so.
Ouch. What city, so I don't go there?
There's Kansas City.
Oh, Kansas City. So Mike is a Kansas City native. Mike is one of our pastors at Prairie Heights, and he came with me today. Whew, that's a lot of money. I have not lost $150, and I certainly haven't lost $1,000. So, okay, so a day's wages is what that coin represented. But that was, you got to remember, Jesus' society, women had no opportunity to earn income. And so that would be a day's wage, but for a a woman, for a widow, whew, that was probably a month's wages. I mean, they didn't have an opportunity to earn money as a man did in his society. It was a very, patriarchal, a male-dominated society. A woman didn't have an opportunity to work. They were totally dependent on a husband to earn an income for their family. So that was, let's just say that was a month's wages. Now, I'm guessing even $1,000 was not a month's wages. And I'm guessing you didn't feel real great about losing $1,000. So Jesus said, holy cow, if this woman lost one of those 10 coins, I mean, wouldn't she just go nuts trying to find it? I mean, wouldn't she turn the lights on and move all the carpets and look behind, take all the cushions, all the places where you find cell phones and wallets, you look everywhere. And houses weren't real big in Jesus' time, shacks. So who knows? She would have worked day and night looking for that coin. Because, I mean, that was her life as far as food, as far as having an opportunity to exist, right? And Jesus said, when she finds that coin, wouldn't she call the neighbors and man, I found it. And wouldn't they have a celebration? So he talks about a sheep and he talks about a coin. And then, of course, the key story we want to look at today is the son, the prodigal son. So it went from a sheep to a coin to a man who has 2 sons. And one of his sons decides to leave. So not 1 out of 100 sheep, not 1 out of 10 coins, but 1 out of 2 sons. So I'm going to, rather than reading the scripture, okay, sorry. So Brian, if you would just play, instead of reading it, I have a video of some folks reading the scripture. And so this is Luke chapter 15. So it would be the one that says the prodigal son, the one on the right. Yeah, that guy right there.
There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger said to his father,
Father, I want right now what's coming to me.
So he divided his property between them.
A few days later, this younger son packed all his belongings and took a trip to a distant land.
And there wasted all his money in wild living. He had spent everything. When a bad famine spread through that whole land, soon he had nothing
He
to
was
eat.
hungry and needed money. So he went and got a job with one of the people who lived there. The man sent him to the fields to feed pigs.
He would have been glad to eat what the pigs were eating, but no one gave him a thing. Finally, he came to his senses.
He said, how many of my father's hired servants have food to spare?
And here I am starving to death. I'm going back to my father. I'll say to him, Father, I've sinned against God. I've sinned before you.
I am no longer worthy to be called your son.
let me be like one of your hired workers. So he left and he went to his father. While the son was still a long way
While
off,
he was still a long way
he
off,
felt sorry for him.
his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his
So
son,
he ran to
threw
him
his
and
arms
hugged him
around
and
him
kissed him.
and kissed him.
The son said, Father, I have sinned against God and have done wrong to you. I am no
I
longer
don't
worthy
deserve to be called your son ever
But the
again.
father said to his
But the
servants,
father wasn't listening. He was calling to the servants, quick, bring a clean set of clothes and dress him. Put the family ring on his finger and sandals on his feet.
Get the best calf and prepare it.
Bring the
So we can
fattened
eat
calf
and celebrate.
Let's have a feast and celebrate.
This son of mine was dead, but
His
has
son
now
of
come
mine
back
was
to
dead
life.
and has returned to life. He was lost and is found.
He was lost
So the party
and is found.
Lost
So
and
they
now
began
found.
to celebrate.
And they began to have a wonderful time.
I have some friends here in Fargo-Moorhead. They have 3 children. They have 2 sons and a daughter. And they have not seen their one son for over 20 years. When he turned 18, 19, he left, just like the prodigal son. And they literally have not heard from him. Through some common friends, they think he's living in the Twin Cities somewhere, but he has decided that he does not want to be a part of their family. And every holiday, every Christmas, I can see the grief on their heart. They're part of our church, so I've known them for 20 years now, almost. I can't imagine, as a dad, what it's like to be apart from your son for that many years without even getting a phone call, without knowing, without hanging out with him at a holiday. And so we can go ahead and put the lights back on, if you will. I'll show the other video a little later. But I think we all have a story, is what I'm convinced of. What I've learned is I've got a story. Shawnee, you've got a story. Mike, we all have a story. And I do believe that woven throughout our stories, there was a time or times where we either found ourselves, or maybe today we find ourselves as being a little bit disconnected. We kind of can relate to that sheep that is kind of off from, quote, the rest of the flock, that coin that is lost, or that son who was disenfranchised, who was disconnected, and longing for more. I think that what we discover in life is that we all have a longing for more. That's wired into us by God. And so on your notes there are 3 longings that I'm convinced we all have. The first one is a longing for love. We all have a longing for love. 6-month-old baby, what's their favorite game to play? Peekaboo, right? You put a blanket on them and you pull it off and they light up, or even just doing this with a little 6-month-old and they giggle and they smile. Why is that? Because we all have a longing to be connected. We all have a longing to be loved, and there's something about being separated and then seeing them, and being separated and seeing them. Our son Nate, he's 21, he's in the Army now with as Brian's daughter. We called blankets kikis when he was a little boy, and man, there was nothing more. We'd put the kiki, and when he was too young, we would pull it off, but then once he got a little bit older, we'd put the kiki, and then he would struggle, and as soon as, our face would be about this far away from him, and as soon as he got it off, he would just light up. We all have a longing to be loved, to give love, to receive love, and then when a child is maybe, 2, 3, what's their favorite game? Peekaboo isn't cool anymore. What's the big game when a 3, 4, 5-year-old? Hide and seek. You got it. Same principle, right? I'm going to hide, and mom and dad, you come and you find me, and we giggle and we squeal, and the children often will just hide in the same exact spot over and over and over again. But they want to be loved. They want to be found, And if you don't find them, what will they do? Mommy, I'm over here. They're dying to be found. But then what do? They want to play again, right? And so we all have a longing to be loved. I looked this up last night. I don't know, it's just kind of funny and goofy. But Glenn Wolfe, he is in the Guinness Book of World Records. The dude was married 29 times. He passed away about 20 years ago, and I did some reading about him. But his longest marriage was 7 years, and his shortest marriage was 19 days. So, why would anyone be married 29 times? Well, the guy was obviously not, whatever. The guy was crazy. But it was interesting to read about how he was very flamboyant and how he would divorce this one, and then he'd get married real quick again, divorce, and he's just getting married his whole life. But why would why do we even get married one time? Because we have a longing to be loved. In fact, we've all seen, and maybe it's even been you or I, we'd rather be in a bad relationship than not have any relationship, right? No one wants to be. What is the worst punishment? Solitary confinement, right? To be separated. Because we all have a longing. We are wired to love and to give love and to receive love. So that was one of the longings that we all have. We all have a longing for purpose. I wrote a column about that, I think it was 2 weeks ago. Tell me, when you were a small child, whatever age, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Pharmacist.
You want to be a pharmacist. What age do you think that was?
10 to 18.
Okay, so at age 10, you were already thinking about wanting to be a pharmacist. Isn't that interesting? Someone else, what did you want to be? What was one of your first?
A teacher.
That's what my daughter. How old were you when you wanted to be a teacher?
Like 7 or 8.
Yeah, so 7 and 8, you're thinking about a career. Doesn't that just seem odd? Like, you didn't even know what a bill was. Jack, how about you when you were young?
Marine biologist.
A marine biologist. And what age do you think?
As soon as I started reading, I suppose.
Wow, isn't that fascinating? So just think about that. I wanted to be a fireman. They came to school and we got the little red fire hat, and I was like, I'm going to be a fireman. And then I changed to being a rancher, and then I got some gloves and started playing, wristbands and started playing basketball. I want to be a professional basketball player. Phil Jackson, I'm from Williston. He's from Williston. He was in the NBA at that time for the Knicks, and I just thought that was like, I'm going to be the second professional basketball player from Williston. I'm like, I'm going to get there, And, never been a rancher, never been a fireman, and certainly never made it to the NBA. But why do kids, why like that age are we already thinking about career? Because we have a longing for purpose. We all want to contribute something, right? Because we certainly didn't understand bills and we didn't understand, but we are wired to contribute something. In fact, often, let's be honest, why there was also a good column in the paper recently about how the golden years aren't all that golden in the column, on the Sunday column. Why are sometimes the golden years aren't all that golden? It's because we feel like we're just kind of off. We're just kind of putting our time in. We wonder, what are we contributing? Because we all have a longing, friends, for purpose. And the third thing is we all have a longing for meaning. A 2-year-old, their favorite word, 1-year-old probably even, is no. And Mike, how old is your son, Judah?
3.
He's 3. What's his favorite word?
Why?
Why? That's actually a pretty good question. Until it happens like 5 times in a row in 5 seconds, right? I have a 4th grader, and she still asks the why. In fact, this morning she was asking me a why question. I'm like, I just need to get out of the house to get to breakfast. I had a breakfast meeting. And she's like, why do you do this? And why do you, Mom, talk about this? And I'm like, oh. So, why? But you know what? We all have that question. That sticks with us. We all are looking for reasons. Things like, man, God, why did this happen? Or why am I here? What's the purpose of a job? And what's my purpose? And we all have a longing for meaning. We all have questions about, why am I in pain? We all have why questions for God. We have why questions for each other. So here's a key thought that I think this teaches us. The longing for more is what we should feel, all right? Because the longing for love, the longing for purpose, and the longing for making sense out of hard stuff, those longings come from God. I believe that's one of the reasons why I would have a hard time being an atheist. Because I believe there's just too much in us that points to a created power, that I didn't just happen, that we are wired for connection with our Creator. The problem is that all of us are very tempted to be like the prodigal son. We have a longing for more, we have a longing for love, we have a longing for purpose, and instead of finding hope in those longings in God, what do? We go out and chase stuff, don't we? So, would someone read, I don't have the notes, but would someone read that verse 13? It's the first Bible verse on the left side there. Would you read that, please?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're okay.
Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living.
Yeah. So what did his longings lead him to do? Set off for a distant country. Oh, I don't know what it is for you. I could tell you some of the things it's been for me over these years. I felt poor growing up as a kid, single mom. My dad died when I was young. Come to NDSU, my dream was to make $30,000 a year. If you would have asked me I came to Fargo in 1985, that was my dream. That was my longing, because I felt like money was going to give me security. Money was going to help me to have friends. Money would solve some of those longings that I was feeling. Did it? No. I just set off for a distant country. And I realized that money's not going to solve these longings. So he squandered all of that wealth in wild living. I don't know. Where would we go to squander our wealth in wild living? Would it be Las Vegas? Would it be, I don't know, Kindred? Would it be, Playboy Mansion in Hollywood? I don't know. But he squandered all of his wealth on wild living. He told his dad, man, I want what's mine, and I'm going to solve these longings. I have a longing. He didn't know it, but he had a longing for love, for purpose, for meaning, and he decided to set off on a distant country. And the result, would someone read, Shawnee, would you be willing to read verse 15 and 16 right below that, please?
He went and hired himself out to the citizens of that country, who sent him to his field to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything.
Yeah. So here he is, off in a distant country. He'd squandered all his wealth, and he was all alone, and he ends up hiring himself out. He had grown up on a farm, and so he's like, well, that's all I know to do. And so he actually went to work for someone else's farm, not his dad's, but someone else's. And he was so hungry physically that the slop that he was feeding the pigs. Now, I don't know, did any of you guys anyone grow up on a farm in here? You did? No? I haven't, but I can only imagine, like, I've never fed pigs or cattle, but I can't imagine it's super appetizing. But the very slop that he was feeding those pigs, he wanted to eat. He was that broken. He was that empty. He was that separated and distant. What he discovered, guys, you know what, gals? His longing for love, it wasn't satisfied in another woman. His longing for purpose, partying, going to more parties, having more fun, traveling more, it didn't solve that longing for purpose. His journey actually left him with even more why questions. He went out on this journey to find answers, and he finds himself with having even more questions. Why am I working on someone else's farm, and I'm not even being paid enough that I can physically eat myself? You know, can you imagine what was going through his mind? Like, why did I end up here? You know, what am I doing? So I want to show you I have a video story that I want to show you at this point. It's about a 4-minute, it is about a 4-minute video, right?
I was laying in the highway, all I smelled was smoke and antifreeze. I had had like 6 or 7 drinks, went to a few more. I was tired from working all day. My face was hurt. Didn't know what happened. Somebody saying the paramedics were coming. I felt like I was okay to drive. A woman crying out, nodding down once. I was in a sleepy state, called into an ambulance, in and out of consciousness, rolled down the window, get some fresh air blown in on me. Didn't know what was happening. Felt like I was in a dream. I was 21, more intoxicated. I heard another voice crossing the center line of the highway, a glimpse of my family, chaos, confusion. What's going on? She said, these officers, you take blood from you. The guilt and the anguish and the hurt that came upon my shoulders just was overwhelming. I've never felt anything like it in my life. I knew that I'd really done it. I'd really let myself become so far out of control that even I couldn't fix it now. And I remember as they released me from the hospital and took me into custody, getting down on my knees and crying out to God, and I said, God, please help me. Please help me. What have I done? And I was feeling so bad about the situation and so bad about what had happened and being responsible for what I was responsible for that I just didn't even really want to live. I didn't want to live no more. I didn't want to keep going forward. But when I cried out to God, He came to me in my time of need. I think some people God reaches through subtlety, and I think he's able to touch the lives of people in different ways. In my instance, it was an iron fist and hard love. He knew that I had to reach my bottom before I'd open my eyes. I was so hard-headed, I just didn't want to accept him. And when I cried out to him, it was a plea of just come help me. And Lord, if you'll help me through this, I'll surrender. And when I surrendered my life to him, it just changed. Everything changed. Everything changed. Through all that happened, I lost my business, I lost my family, I lost a wife that I was newly wed to. I lost everything that this life had given me, and I had earned in this life and on my own will. But Jesus had also given me freedom from sin, freedom from the life that I was living through his forgiveness and his love, his grace. And if it hadn't been for his mercy and grace in my life, I'd either be dead right now or in prison somewhere, rotting away. Alcohol is not even a part of my life anymore. Doesn't play any role in my life whatsoever. In fact, I was encountered with this situation shortly after my accident and accepted Christ. I knew that Christ was real to me. I knew that he was real. When I was confronted with the single most thing that I was weak to in my life, and he gave me power over that, not in a strength that I had ever known, but a strength that was new to me. And I just knew it was God. I knew it was God. I knew he was real. And I knew he had the power over sin. And it was evident in my life. My name is James Caldemeyer, and I am sick.
So the reason James Caldemeyer says he's second is because God is now first in his life. So I have to ask myself, I think all of us have to ask ourselves, where am I searching in life for love? When relationships aren't what I want them to be, where do I go? When I'm searching for purpose, what do I do? When I have why questions and I struggle with meaning and wondering what's going on, and who do I turn to? What do I do? Do I head off for a distant country? Squander the wealth that God has given me? Or do I turn to God? Do I seek him? Do I fill those questions with the only source that I can? I was actually thinking about my grandfather as I was watching that video. My grandfather, my one grandfather died long before I was born. My other grandfather died when I was in college. I saw him twice in my life. My mom only saw her dad, who was my grandfather. She saw him less than 10 times in her entire life. He worked on the road. He gambled and hung out at the bar, and I don't know about gals what he did, but he was very focused on work and fun, hobbies and work, and did not have a lot of time for his family throughout his life. My mom went to visit him when he was in his late 70s, and his eyesight had gone, so he no longer could go to the bar and gamble because he couldn't see the cards, and his health wasn't good, so he couldn't travel anymore, he couldn't drive. My mom went to visit him. He lived in Montana, about 300 miles away from where we did. But she felt like she needed to go and visit him, and she did. And I'll never forget, my mom came back and she said, you know what, John? My dad is one of the loneliest men you'll ever find. Because his whole life was built around having fun. And once he no longer had fun to offer people, no one came around. He didn't know God. He hadn't invested in a relationship with God. He didn't know his family because he never invested in his family. And my mom used that as a teachable moment for me. She said, man, I wish I could take you out so you could see Grandpa. Because she said, when I came to leave, and her dad, my grandfather, obviously because of how he lived his life, he was not a hug person. He wasn't warm emotionally. And she said, when I came to leave, she said, he gave me the first time I'd ever gotten a hug from him in my life. And she said, he squeezed me so tight. And she said, when I came to walk away to get in my car to come back home, she said, he had tears coming down his cheek. She said, John, that is a result. If you choose to live a life outside of God and you squander your life on wild living, she said, sooner or later at the end of your life, you won't have the harvest that you won't. And I'll never forget her telling me, she said, you know what? Once Grandpa he can't offer fun for everybody, no one comes around. And he's lonely. And he teared up as I had to leave his house. So, here's where we're headed then. I'm wrapping up. There is, if you'd like a copy of a book called Finding Your Way Back to God, the book talks about the 5 awakenings that we all need based on the prodigal son. So today I just shared with you the first awakening. And the first awakening is I need to awaken to the fact that we all have a thirst for more. And that's from God. So that's the first awakening, but we need to acknowledge that, you know what? If I head off to a distant country, I'm not going to find the answers for that more. It's only in God. And so why did Jesus tell these 3 stories? It's because no one's too far. No one's too far away that God doesn't desperately want to bring us back into his family. And I think Jesus told these 3 stories because he did everything he could to make a path for you and I to make our way back home, to make our way back to being a part of connection with God through his son, Jesus Christ. So awakening number 1 is awakening to our longing for love, purpose, and meaning. Next month, I think it's Brian, May 10th, I think we're back. And so I'll talk about awakening number 2, which James also referred to. But the second awakening is sooner or later, we have to awaken to regret. We have to realize, holy cow, I now find myself a long way from home. And it's not too late, but sooner or later, we have to grapple with that. And so that'll be the second awakening. And then I just put a prayer for you at the end that I would just throw out to you that you may want to pray. So I'll just give you a little bit of background. If you're familiar with a man named Blaise Pascal, any of you heard of a man named Pascal? He is a famous mathematician, scientist. When I was in college, we took Pascal was a computer programming language. But Pascal grew up in a religious home, but he didn't know God, I would say in a personal way, or Pascal has said that. But sometime in his mid-20s, he had an awakening to a relationship with God. And in his day, he was, in the 16th century? The time of, so he hung out with a lot of atheists and a lot of agnostics and folks that were very skeptical about faith. And so Pascal used to use some intellect to challenge them. And so what Pascal did is he had a passion to help people find God the same way that he had. So what he would do is he would dare them to step into a belief about God and just see, just see, maybe it'll change your life. I mean, you got nothing to lose. So he'd say, I'll bet you, just assume that there is a God and see what happens. He's like, you got nothing to lose, because if you're right and there is no God, you're not out anything. But if you're wrong and there is a God, you have a tremendous amount to gain. So who wouldn't take that bet? Hey, I'll bet you this, and if you're right, I won't owe you anything. Or you don't owe me anything, but if you win the bet, I'll give you tons. And so Pascal would challenge people, and he'd say, you know what? Just assume that there is a God. And so he gave them this prayer. Would someone be willing, would someone just read the top prayer? Would you do that, please? I'm sorry.
Yep. God, if you are real, make yourself real to me. Awaken in me the ability to see that you are what's missing from my life. Awaken in me the possibility that with you, I could start over again.
Awesome. And then there is another prayer for those that are following Christ. And so 2 action items for you. If you want, I brought about 10 books, I think. Those are free. I bought those. I have them. So if you want one, it's yours. Just read it. It's a book about the 5 awakenings, finding your way back to God. You can have that. Number 2, I would challenge you, depending where you're at in your faith journey, to pray one of those 2 prayers. Maybe just pray that prayer every day for the next week and just see what God may want to do in your life. I'm going to close with, I have a quick story, a real life story that I just want to read you, an email that I received. And I blackened out her name, so there's no way anyone, because who knows? She works, I don't know, she works probably within 3 miles of where we are right now. But she sent me this email, and I just want to read it to you a little bit, okay? And it ties in with the Pascal prayer, all right? She says, I was baptized and confirmed Lutheran, and I attended church some with my mother. My dad never did religion. I honestly never felt like I belonged when I went to church. I was made to feel by my peers that I wasn't good enough. She grew up somewhere in Minnesota. For this reason, I haven't had Christ in my life for about 15 years. Now that I think about it, I don't know if I ever fully had Christ in my life. As a result, I lived a life of falling into temptations of drinking, sex, unfaithfulness, and materialistic items. She's a professional person here in town. To fill the unhappiness, the emptiness that I was facing. Does that sound familiar at all? Does it sound like exactly the longing for more, the longing for purpose, the longing for love? She says, in 2017, I was going down a path of adultery. I was living a lie that I couldn't handle anymore. I knew that I needed help and I needed guidance. I had attended a couple of churches in Fargo-Moorhead, but they didn't speak to me. I remember an old friend mentioning Prairie Heights to me a few years ago and decided I would attend there on November 5th, 2017. From the moment my husband and I pulled into the parking lot at Prairie Heights, I felt welcomed. We were greeted the moment we stepped out of the vehicle at the doors and when we stepped foot in the building. Everyone at Prairie Heights made me feel like I mattered and I belonged. I had never felt this in my life. Prairie Heights accepts those who are in question with their beliefs, and that is what I needed. I needed help and someone to take me in. What I want to share with you, though, is this last part, okay? I just needed to set this up for you. So she started coming in November. I did this series, Finding Your Way Back to God, last January. And she said, I went back and watched past sermons off of the app. In one of the first ones I watched, Pastor John says a prayer. God, if you are real, make yourself real to me. Awaken within me the ability to see that you are what is missing from my life. Awaken within me the possibility that with you I can start over again. So the Blaise Pascal prayer. Here, listen to what she said. She says, I made up copies of that prayer to have by my bed. It's on my mirror when I get ready in the morning, in my car, on my desk at work, and I also carry a copy in my purse. I'm like, she's got this prayer like all over her life right now. She said, I say that prayer multiple times every day. Then after 5 consecutive Sundays at Prairie Heights, where I felt as though the pastor was talking directly to me, I came clean to my husband about everything. And she said, I've now made a vow to continue a new path with the Lord and to fully accept God into my life. I know that with Christ and a church family, Prairie Heights in this case, in my life, I will be saved, and so will my marriage. And I will tell you that every Sunday, I see this young gal and her husband at church. I see them volunteering. God is restoring their marriage, restoring their home, and I believe it is an example, a real-life example of all of our story. Your story might be different, but her story is no different than all of our stories. And so I just wanted to share that with you since it tied in with that prayer, okay? So I'm just going to say a quick word of prayer, and then thank you guys so much for giving me an opportunity to spend some time with you. So Lord, I just want to say prayer. Your Spirit has been here, and we've opened the Bible, and I don't know where everyone's at spiritually. That's That's their deal, and God yours. I do know, Lord, that you always have something to share with us when we open up your word. And I love the story of Jesus, of how you responded to criticism with these 3 stories. And so, Lord, I just pray your will be done in all of our lives. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. All right. Thank you guys so much.